Major developments right now as it relates to Russia, Ukraine, the US, China, all of that will be discussed here. In the first part of this video, we're going to break it down and basically show you what's been happening. And then I want to give you a little bit of insight as to China's involvement in all of this. It's major, and how their direct involvement will be the official declaration of World War III. This is unbelievable. And then I want to show you a little bit of the economic aspects as it relates to China and their new partners and what they've been doing. And I think that is very important to consider that. So that's going to be in the second part. You got to stick with me. I'll bring you right through. Let's begin by taking a look at Putin warns of global war and makes veiled nuclear threat in deranged speech as he doubles down on Ukraine. Now, we've seen these articles written like this before. I'm just going to highlight what's been happening here is that you have the United States and NATO that have been funding and giving all sorts of different weapons to Ukraine. On the other side, Russia is trying to find their partners in this game. They're partnering with Iran, of course, drone technology. They're looking at Belarus. Belarus is happening, and some others. China is generally in support of Russia, but they're not funding them. They're not, really doing much in that respect. And China's trying to say, and we'll talk more about this in a second, that they want to have a balanced approach. They know they're friends with Russia. I mean, that's very clear, but they're kind of trying to stay out of it. Now, I'll just bring it up right here. The takeaway from this is that while this is all happening, the whole world is looking at Russia, Ukraine, the US, NATO. What they're forgetting about is China, Taiwan. And part of me believes that China is loving what's happening here as more and more funding and resources and attention gets put on Ukraine. China has an opportunity to take Taiwan because they're so distracted. It's just like the Roman Empire. They have themselves spread so thin because they're in all these battles. They've pushed themselves out far and wide that if something starts to happen over here with Taiwan, maybe they can. Maybe they just don't have the resources to get on that. That's something you got to remember with all of this. We'll talk more about that, okay? Here we have it. Pentagon's top China official travels to Taiwan. This was a few days ago. And so this is coming at a time there's so much concern about what's going to happen with Taiwan. Is it going to be a war? Is it going to be peaceful? A lot of that happening right now today. So it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi that went. There have been a few others, but China doesn't like that because it sends a clear message. Ukraine war, Blinken says China might give weapons to Russia. This is what we've been waiting for because this would be the declaration for World War III. And even, Chinese analysts and others have said this, okay? This is not just me saying it. And so we have to watch that. We have to keep a very close eye on this because I think that could just rapidly, absolutely rapidly, from that moment on, increase the tensions. And I think there could be, spread out cyber war attacks. All kinds of things could happen very quickly. Beijing is watching closely if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, NATO says, flagging rising China challenge. So that's what they say. A lot of this, it's just talk, but it is important. Beijing is watching closely on what's going on in Ukraine, and if Putin wins there, of course, that will impact their decisions on how to behave in Asia. And I think part of that is related to not just Taiwan, but the South China Sea. Because you see that China saying, no, all that's ours, all this is ours. No, that area there, oh, that's ours too. Philippines, that's ours too. And so they're doing this, and that's disputed territory. But China is maybe using this as an opportunity, whether it's intentional or not, they're using it as an opportunity. So we'll watch closely on that. Chinese drones still support Russia's war in Ukraine, trade data show. Despite the sanctions, Kremlin continues to deploy small, unmanned Chinese aircraft. So this is just one small piece of the whole puzzle. But of course, China and Russia are very much linked economically, politically, and so on. China deeply worried Russia-Ukraine war could spiral out of control. That's what they're saying, which connects in with this. The leader of China, is apparently going to visit Russia. Big news. Okay, this is huge. Chinese leaders expected to use the Moscow trip to push for multi-party peace talks. Apparently, the peace talks were supposed to happen, but early on, but that was squashed. And the claim is that that was squashed by the U.S. side. Of course, the military-industrial complex is quite powerful, so they would want something like that to happen. But who knows? Who knows what's true? Beijing says it wants to play a more active role aimed at ending the conflict. This, we don't know what to expect here, and you don't see it too often where China is the one saying, let's all sit down, let's all talk. They're usually the ones that just go ahead, do their thing, and do their business, and they don't really listen to people. They're just going ahead with what they feel is right for their country. And so this would be interesting to see if they kind of act as a mediator in this particular instance. This is important, of course, because it affects everybody. I would like to see them actually go into peace talks. They have a vote. They decide on what's going to happen. People get to actually decide on what's going to happen. But who knows? Who knows, really, at this point? There's a lot of needless bloodshed that's taking place. China is trying to drive a fresh wedge between Europe and the United States as Russia's invasion of Ukraine trudges past the 1-year mark. Important to note that China is partnering up with Europe, and I'll show you a chart in just a second to actually explain how that's the case, along with other countries, Saudi and so on, we'll discuss here in just a minute. So right here in a major speech, Wang, who is the foreign policy chief, appealed specifically to the Ukraine leaders gathered there in a conference that they had, a Munich Security Conference. We need to think calmly, especially our friends in Europe, about what efforts should be made to stop the warfare. What framework should there be to bring lasting peace to Europe? What role should Europe play to manifest its strategic autonomy? Isn't that really a big change and would be something major for China? Okay? And so at the same time, basically he said, that there's an attack on the weak Washington's near hysterical reaction to the Chinese balloons over the US airspace. So they're using that as an opportunity to kind of poke at the US during that time. So that connects me in with these charts. How China became the largest EU trade partner. Over the past 10 years, global trade relationships have gone through a reshuffling of sorts. As a result, China has risen towards the EU's top trading partner, displacing the US in the process. And this chart basically just goes back from 2010 up until 2020. The whole point here is just to show you that they're doing more and more business with Europe, and they're doing less and less with the United States in many ways. They're definitely selling off their debt and so on. And it's not to say that they want to be so friendly with Europe, but they just want to get away from the US. That's the way I take it. Saudi Arabia turns to China. Saudi Arabia trade with China, EU 27, and the US. Basically just showing you that over time, this chart goes back from 2001 up until 2021, and you can clearly see the red area, that's China trade. It has increased dramatically over the years. They are doing all kinds of deals with China on so many different levels. Of course, they're buying more oil from Saudi. That's the important one. Saudi has expressed the desire to join the BRICS nations. Imagine that. And they would start to price their own, they've said it, they've multiple times. They have said, we're interested in pricing in other than the US dollar. That's basically what they said. They didn't say, well, we want to price it in the Chinese currency and so on. They said, we'll price it in something else. We're open to that. I think it's pretty clear what they're saying. This is huge news. And this all connects in together. We can see this. The world order is changing. Many things are changing today. Okay? So then we have this, which I believe is incredible. China is no longer viable as the world's factory, according to Kyocera. Japanese component maker is investing at home with the first new plant in nearly 2 decades. Will we see this to be the case in the future? I don't know. But a lot of different changes have happened since 2020. There's different reasons for this, geopolitical problems, the lockdowns are concerned about, and so on. But part of that is the fact that what they're saying in this article is they're saying, okay, the chip controls are going to be put on China, whether that's from the United States, whether that is from the Netherlands, and whether that's from Japan as well. They're saying, okay, the chip controls are going to place. No longer they have the advantage. We'll just build it in our own country. Now, it depends on what you're building. And that could make, big change in the coming years. There's a lot of tension that is just building and building and building. I would love to see some things ease up as it relates to Ukraine, because that is a good sign. I don't want to see it as China taking this opportunity for Taiwan. I don't want to see any escalation at all. Hopefully, we'll see some good news coming out here. And of course, I'll bring that to you. Okay, I hope you found this informative. I wanted to show you the geopolitical side. In the previous video, I showed you the economic side. All of these connect into together. I thank you for being here. If you want the latest and greatest, you got to subscribe to the channel. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.